Hello and welcome to this fourth lecture in our Topical Map and Topical Authority video series. My name is Marc and I'm wearing my SEO hat. That means we are getting serious here in this lesson. But before we get started, I want to promote my ChatGPT course, which I have just launched. You can get it for 199 USD. And you will learn advanced topics like writing your own Chrome extensions with ChatGPT, advanced bookmarks, for example, to see Google Cache, and local SEO as well as affiliate SEO is covered. And the main thing in the course is that you will learn how to create high quality articles that stand the test of time with Google. What I've seen happen a lot is that people use ChatGPT to create low quality content, and a lot of people in the industry are not quite sure on how to create high quality content, and that's what I go over in this course. You'll also learn a little bit about topical maps based on competitors and using ChatGPT for that. The EIT video I've already released, that is on YouTube as a promotion, so you get an insight of what the course is like and to get an idea if that's for you. And on top of that, my agency ecomexperts.au is also available to help you if you have an e-commerce site or you need SEO for your business. We have a few really cool case studies here where we've helped clients to make millions each year in terms of revenue increase, and that's what we focus on at Ecom Experts. So have a look at the case studies over here. All right, let's dive in to our topic today. In the fourth lecture, we will talk about the research process for topical maps. We looked at the commercial side in the last video, meaning we've looked at the services that other law firms have offered, but today we look at the topical map creation process in more detail. For that, we're using the tool called xefer.com and then /Wikipedia. In here, you simply type in all of the topics that you're interested in, and you can definitely use ChatGPT for that. I would recommend you first do a search on, just a site search on Wikipedia, just like this here, to see the related topics that are in your mind, what might be interesting, and then you provide ChatGPT with a list to say, okay, these are the topics on Wikipedia that I'm interested in, find me more topics, and then you can also ask to link to Wikipedia for that. And this process has worked really well. I will show you my ChatGPT on that. If it loads up, seems to have a problem right now. All right, cool. So I had first manually curated this list here, and then my prompt was, based on these Wikipedia page titles, provide me more relevant page titles on the topic of family law, and so on. And then ChatGPT came back with this list, and then I've told ChatGPT put that into a comma-separated list, combine it with my original list, and then we had this hierarchy, which is pretty cool. We got a lot of really good topics out of it here. We have relevant things regarding to family law, the Family Law Act, which is a law that has been passed in Australia. For anybody who hasn't watched the second video or the third video, which is about the first part where we create a topical map for a law firm, that's what we're up to here. So right now we are researching the topical SEO map for a law firm in Australia. Could be in Western Australia or in Sydney. That would definitely be a difference. But certain aspects here are Australia-wide, like anybody who's talking about the topic of divorce or family law needs to define on their website what marriage is, right? That's a central concept. And other topics such as common law relationship, domestic partnership, and de facto relationships. These are really important to cover on the website so that we also have places to link back to. When we have an article about divorce lawyer, then we want to have a place to link back to internally to de facto relationship, for example, and therefore we need to define what that is on a separate page, and that will be the theme here. But first, let me show you, now that you've kind of seen how I gathered this list. So you've seen how I gathered this list over here. And then I've taken this whole list and put it into the XEFR tool, which has given us this massive graph here. Now this is a little bit awkward to navigate because we would like to kind of see everything, but then it overlaps. But we can zoom out here. I've got this also in Photoshop, so we can zoom out here, I believe, in Photoshop a bit further. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So this is probably now too small for you to see, but so we have here the origination of where the knowledge comes from. So if you go into looking at just family law, the family law is derived from the Family Law Act, which is derived from the Parliament, and the Parliament is part of the primary legislation in Australia, and then apparently there's primary and secondary legislation. Don't ask me how that works, but it's good to know that where the knowledge fits in. And let's go a bit deeper. Primary and secondary legislation is part of the law, and then is part of government. Government is part of state policy, and so on. And I love how this goes all the way back most of the time to philosophy. So the idea here of this graph, you can see here is philosophy. The idea of this graph is something like this, where in order for knowledge to exist, we need to have language. So the very first thing would be language that needs to be there. And from language, then philosophy is derived. And then from philosophy, there are certain subcategories of knowledge that are derived, like science. And then you have different sciences like medicine, biology, physics, chemistry, and so on. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because Google's knowledge graph would be organized in a similar way. So when you're talking about, we've had the example of Michael Jordan, of course, things like probably chemistry, maybe physics would be quite interesting in terms of the physics of jumping and the biology of jumping in sports and basketball and stuff. And then, but the idea here is that we look at the topic that we're discussing, not just from the angle of, oh, we have a keyword here and let's just write about it. We look at it in the same view that Google would view knowledge graphs. And this is how they would view it, where knowledge comes from a certain source and it's mapped into a very specific category. And for you to be able to cover your topical map fully, you need to have a view of what the different relationships and categories are, so that you can then include them in your topical map. And I will show you the mistake that most people make with their topical maps now. All right, cutting straight to the chase here. The most common mistake that people make with their topical map is that they stay inside of the commercial sector most of the time. Meaning if you are a drinking water company, you would only be writing about commercial topics like what's the best bottled water brand, generally speaking bottled water, maybe sparkling water, benefits, non-alcoholic drinks. So you're constantly staying in this commercial area where you're only talking about directly your product. And that's pretty much what I'm seeing the most of the time happening when SEOs do the general keyword research. It could be a source because they want to tell the client the topics that they're writing about. And it might be a bit hard to explain to a client if they have a drinking water company and you say you want to write about the pH level of drinking water. They might be like, why, right? It's not going to lead to new customers because they're just not somebody who's researching pH level. Just because you've written a good article is then not going to buy your drinking water. And so with that in mind, we've here looked at this framework, which you can also use. We have here a border, which is to signify that this is outside of what your topical map will cover, but it's still important to know what's behind there. And we can break this down further. So these topics here are all about the human body, like the whole human body can experience overhydration, dehydration. The human body can react to drinking cold water. There are benefits to drinking water in the morning, which are all related to the human body. But then it goes deeper here, and here you have the things that are outside of the topical map. So you have here human body, and outside of that clearly would be general human health, medical science, science in general, philosophy, and then language. All of these are essentially needed in order to talk about the human body or the benefits of cold water for the human body and so on. But we need to have a border that's outside of what we will talk about on this website. And clearly it's not practical to start talking about philosophy here. Yet it's good to know that these subcategories of knowledge and science exist behind that, and then to ask yourself, what am I covering on my website right now, and in what topical science categories would that fall into? And so here we've broken it down to chemistry, which is stuff like the pH level, the water quality, as well as environmental topics like pollution, water shortage, and potentially bottled versus tap water, where we could also talk about plastic pollution and similar things. And then commercial. This is the part where people usually are already doing things correctly because they are including the things that directly relate to their product. So if you would say commercial for a plumber, these would be the services essentially for a plumber, like fixing a blocked drain. Those types of things are already usually covered, but the other parts not so much. And I would recommend for you to start with 4 sectors. So to label these with 4 sectors as they relate to your industry, and then brainstorm the topics that could go into this. This is not meant to give you the full topical map. I wouldn't recommend trying to build this out in this framework altogether. This is just a method for you to brainstorm how you can tackle your topical map from different angles in order to complete it. Because as mentioned, if you're always staying only in this sector, Google also has less trust and confidence in your site, because you're not covering the topic of drinking water fully if you're only talking about sparkling water, luxury sparkling water brands and so on. This is all kind of commercial angle. Whereas somebody in Google's mind, if somebody has interest in sparkling water brands 2023, for example, then there also might be interest of that person in the pH level or in chemistry topics or environmental topics or other topics. And that's why Google gives people a boost for covering their topical map in this way, as opposed to just talking about the commercial topics, because the user satisfaction, if you always stay only in this bottom right quadrant here, the user satisfaction in here is somewhat limited, right? Because you've already read the article about the best 2023 luxury water brands. There's not that much more that you can discover there potentially just staying in this quadrant. And it's just a framework, so you don't have to stick with 4. If you only find 3, I think you might be missing something. You should be probably at least finding 4, but I've here expanded this for the lawyer into 6 categories at the moment. Looks like we're up to 7 already. So for law, family law and divorce, we have romance, love, which things like a domestic partnership could fall into that. We could also define what a spouse is. Under this, we could also define marriage, and then we have like legal versus church or religion. Can have some definitions there. With that, whenever there's a kind of versus thing, you want to bring it back to what the core topic of your website is. So in our case, it's family law. So we're going to cover much less about religion and much more about legal. So that's going to be the common theme there. But here in children, so we have here biology, and then we talk about children. We also talk about the legal definition. What is a child, right? There must be a legal definition that says people under this age are considered a child, for example. And we also want to do the disambiguation there to talk about the legal aspects versus the biological aspects, but again, legal will be much bigger, and this would not be an article. So as we've talked about previously, you always have the choice of making something a small section. Let's say if this whole document here is a web page, you can make a topic into a small section where you just cover it in a paragraph essentially, or you can make the whole document all about the biology of children, for example. That would be wrong, if that makes sense, because you are then diluting the topical map. You're making Google think that you are talking mostly about the biology of children, which is not the case. It needs to be only discussed in the framework of the legal definition for children, and then we're disambiguating the biology aspect within that. Cool. What is an asset? Really important one, because people are mostly fighting about money, right? Money and kids, that's the thing when they are getting divorced. So we need to have a definition of what an asset is, and then also the different types of assets that can exist. So we'd have here property, cars, cash, shares. People also split up their business needs to be valued in some cases. So this is the financial aspect of it. And again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means here. This is just a mental framework that we can use. And an interesting one is the mental state or the emotions involved in a marriage. Things like a parenting plan, emotional trauma, family estrangements, they could all fall under these categories here. And then of course the legislation is really important, where we have different types of law, like common law, criminal law, tort law, which should all be processed, but most likely just in one article, because we have a family law focus, and if you open a separate page on the topic of criminal law, it's sending the wrong message to Google. We only want to again disambiguate how family law works, and in order to do that, we most likely need to mention the other things like criminal law, commercial law, and so on, but not opening a new article for that. Cool. Contract law is important in the context of a prenup or a binding financial agreement, mainly because under the common law, from what I remember at uni, we're not assuming that two people in a romantic relationship want to enter into a contract with each other, as far as I remember. So that's why we need to mention contract law in regards to prenups. But again, this would be most likely also just a heading 2 inside of an article about a prenup. We wouldn't talk more about contract law other than that. We've reached the end of this video. As a closing remark, I want to say that so far we have not done any traditional keyword research. We've merely explored the topics on competitor websites and the topics on Wikipedia, which is sufficient to build an understanding of the topic and a topical map. And I would recommend for you to go in the same process and follow the same steps. That is because if you start with the keyword research, you might be tempted to straight away start with the keyword clustering and organizing all of your keywords. And you could be mapping out on actually understanding the different relationships that exist between your topics, and also missing out on important topics that you could have otherwise found, but because you're now focused on the keywords and not so much on understanding the knowledge graph of your website, that's why I would say it's really important to start with the knowledge graph research first, as we've done it here. And now that we have that, you can save that for yourself and then do the keyword research, and then you can start mapping keywords into these specific areas, such as for example, here we've got child support. Now we know that this node of child support will be somewhere under child custody most likely as well. And we can then map all of the keywords for child support into that, which also goes into the next question, right? How much should we cover in each node? And I would say we want to keep it to 20 to 30 pages to start with, to keep it manageable, right? Because if you're doing this for an SEO client, you can't really start with 200 pages, because how are you going to write those? And how long is it going to take in order to launch 200 pages for an SEO client that might be paying you $1,500 or $2,000 per month? That would take a while if you want to do them in a good way with graphics supporting each of them. So that's why I recommend starting small and starting with a definition of the top pages. So such as what is a marriage, what is a de facto relationship, what is a divorce. These types of pages are the most important ones, because everything else then follows under that. Perfect. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next lesson. Thank you.